Hey, ladies and gentlemen, this is the podcast from WorldChangers, and today we have a really special guest for us. You can go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure to be here and also share a bit about my research and perspectives on brain computer interface. So, about me, I'm currently doing my PhD in LUT University in Finland. My research area is in the development of brain computer interface industry in China. So I look at broadly the political economy aspect of it, including the role of the government in providing industrial policies, drafting regulatory frameworks, and financing research, as well as the role of the private sector, how businesses develop products, what their business models are, and how they launch their applications. I think my research is quite relevant for understanding overall China's approach for developing high tech sectors, basically seeing BCI as a case study. I'll just leave it there for now.
Okay, wow, that is really informative. So, I remember that you said part of the focus of your research is on Chinese approach on high tech. Now,
Mhm.
what do you mean by that specifically?
Right. I think it's important to see the development of China from a historical perspective in the sense that currently we are seeing many advanced technological sectors developing in China. Some of them have reached world leading positions. So, take, for example, 5G communication, electric vehicles, green energy, high speed trains, satellites, and so on. But this is something new for China in the past 15 to 20 years because I believe that around the world, people generally, probably not so much now, but for a long time, since the 70s and 80s, people see China as the manufacturer of the world, right? It's labor intensive manufacturing, cheap products, toys, textiles, furniture, and so on. I think among policymakers around the world and also tech industry stakeholders, there is a growing interest in understanding how come there have been many successful technological sectors developing in China, reaching world leading positions.
Okay. All right. That is a really interesting point. So, like, what is the driving factor behind? What is the secret sauce? And then, what can other countries learn from it?
So many people are working on trying to find the answer. It's a very complicated question, I would say. Like I said, I believe researchers in Europe and North America and also in other developing countries are looking into the reasons. And there are many. And also, depending on your standpoint, people might come up with different understandings. But from my point of view, I believe that it's also rooted in China's historical development since 1949, in the sense that sovereign development has always been a goal for China and also for the party and for the country. But what caught people's attention after open air reform was one approach for China to integrate itself into the world economy by basically opening up its markets and also transferring certain technologies from the West and accepting industrial transfer from the developed world to China. At that time, China focused on manufacturing. But the problem with focusing on manufacturing and just accepting technology transfer in China was that the highest technology was not truly transferred into China. It was somewhat outdated, and as a hub for manufacturing, you don't really need to do so much R&D. It's more building different parts and, as you know, these production lines, right? Low value added, low technological input. So that contradicts with China's ambition to become a sovereign country in its own development because it's highly dependent on foreign capital, foreign technology. So around the beginning of the 21st century, there has been a huge shift in China's industrial policy and technology policy paradigm. And that shift had a strong emphasis on indigenous innovation. So encouraging and also creating conditions for local innovation to happen from either local companies or local universities and research centers. So that's more like the starting point in the 21st century. And again, it's rooted in China's ambition to be a sovereign country in its own development. I think I will leave it there for now. We can discuss more later.
Okay. Yeah. That was really interesting to listen the story behind Chinese development. So let's also make a pivot to more
Mhm.
like the business side. I know that you visited a load of Chinese BCI companies in your business trip. In the process, are there any interesting BCI companies that caught your eyes?
It's hard to say which company caught my eye, but I have seen a variety of companies. And what interested me was that the universities have been an important driving force for creating or is an important birthplace for many companies in China. So, for example, I visited companies in Shanghai, Beijing, and Tianjin. In these regions, they have strong universities that have brain computer interface or neuroscience research centers, which gave rise to multiple companies. So basically, spin offs from universities. I thought that was an interesting pattern because it showed that technology and these companies were born out of public research institutions. And because of that, many of them have a rather strong and solid research foundation, some of them up to a decade long of research. Therefore, these companies, I mean, not all, because I've only visited around 20 companies. So, because of the strong research foundation, I think there is credibility in their products. Because currently, in the overall BCI scene in China, and I assume it might be similar or maybe different in the United States, there are companies who are coming in or being founded because there is like a boom of the industry and people just want to come in, create the company, make some money when they don't really have the technical foundation. But from some
Okay.
of the companies that I visited, I believe that they have a rather valid technical foundation to be able to actually provide and build products that are useful.
Okay. Yeah, that that sounds about right. So when you said that you'd be better for them to have a solid technical background, what is the typical or expected technical background that most Chinese BCI startup founders have?
Well, again, from the companies that I visited, some of them, for example, would have an interdisciplinary team of engineers, neuroscientists, people coming from the medical background. So they understand the medical needs of patients and so on, as well as
Okay.
people from AI backgrounds. I think this seems to be somewhat representative, or it's a common mix of team members in some of the companies that I visited.
I see. And then when you said that you saw a pattern of universities incubating BCI
Mhm,
companies,
mhm.
we can like specify more on that. So what do most Chinese BCI companies need and how do Chinese universities meet those demands?
I think many of the companies were created because local governments now have targets to, you can say, incubate or cultivate or see the development of a certain number of BCI companies in their own region. So, for example, in Guangdong province, the goal is to have 100 BCI companies by 2030. So, out of all these companies, some of them will be created or will be founded by private actors, but the key ones are probably from the universities. So I think there is a coordination mechanism between the university and the local government's ambitions for the industrial development. And in this process, the university provides more of the foundational research. They basically provide knowledge. And through coordination with local governments, there can be extra funding, financing provided, other types of business services provided, usually in combination
Okay.
with local governments. Because another interesting phenomenon is also that in most cities in China that are currently cultivating the BCI industry, and there are 14 to 15 cities as of now. So in these cities, there is usually a industrial cluster, which usually takes form of a specific building. It could be one or two to three, 1 to 3 to 4 buildings. And these companies basically locate in these buildings, and then they enjoy different types of services, consultancy, and events organized by the local university and by the local government.
Okay. So that is the effort from both the government and university.
Mhm. Yes, yes.
Okay. Sounds really supportive. Maybe we should creating a branch of WorldChangers in China as well. I was quite impressed to hear that the Chinese government want to incubate or cultivate 1,000 Chinese BCI companies.
I think
Um,
this is the most
okay.
ambitious industrial policy that I have seen. Because, for example, Beijing, Shanghai, Shenzhen, they all have it. But for Canton, it does seem quite ambitious.
Okay. So is there a kind of universal policy for BCI in China, or like each local government will make their own policy?
Yes, yes. So in 2025, there was an important national policy document issued by 7 national level ministries and departments. It's called Opinions on Guiding the Brain Computer Interface Industry. And in that
Okay.
policy, there was a overarching policy framework laid out, and local governments kind of take inspiration from the national policy and adapt to based on their local conditions and set their own goals in terms of the scale of the industry, the type of companies that they want to focus on, and also the types of application and use cases that they want to focus on.
Okay, got you. So to me, it seems that there is an overarching policy that supports BCI, but local
Mhm,
governments will also adapt this strategy or ambition based on
mhm.
their current situation.
Yes.
Okay, then my follow-up question is why BCI? Why is this view so niche and special to the Chinese government?
I think it's a really good question. And for me, I'm also still in the process of understanding it. But if we look at the policy initiative, the development of BCI in China is not something that's uniquely only in China. It's happening along with a global trend of major
Mhm.
countries focusing on brain research and the BCI industry. And this kind of global trend can date back to 2015 to 2016, so mid 2010s, when in the EU, the United States, Japan, South Korea, and Australia, I believe, these governments have launched their own national brain research projects. So,
Okay,
in response to this, China also launched its own officially in 2021. So, when Neuralink was founded by Elon Musk, engineers and policymakers saw that as an industry with a very promising future. The reason being,
okay,
Elon Musk had successfully created 2 important industries. One is the electric vehicle, and the other is spaceship. So in China, I think there is a kind of enthusiasm in what Elon Musk chooses to do. And so the rationale is okay, so we see many governments around the world doing this, and Elon Musk is focusing on this industry. We cannot be left behind. So,
okay. So,
yeah. So I think this is,
sounds a bit FOMO.
yeah, so this is one of the important reasons, at least when I talk to industry stakeholders, some people would say
Okay,
that 80% of the reasons why China started on BCI attributes to Elon Musk.
wow,
So that's
I
how
see.
industry people see it.
Okay, okay. I really like the wording you use here. You said global trend. So I'm going to ask you a global question then. Looking at BCI industries in different countries, China, you also mentioned Japan, United States, or European countries, what is the current development stage for those countries so that the audience can have a more broad global understanding of BCI industry in this world?
Right, right, right. Well, I must say I am not an expert on the global development of the industry, but I could say that if we look at the number of companies globally and the overall number of financing in the industry, China and the United States are the major players in a way similar to how the AI sector is like today, with probably only two major players being China and the United States. It's quite similar in the sector of BCI. I think the development of this industry, because it's rather interdisciplinary and it's rather frontier and cutting edge, and it requires concerted effort from many different stakeholders and very big funding. It's not an industry that many countries or that all countries can focus on. The major players are currently in a few places, primarily China and the USA.
I see. And then you also mentioned that when Elon Musk founded Neuralink, and when it achieved such great progress, other people have already seen the promising future of BCI. So, what is the promising future of BCI, or what is your prediction on that?
I don't have any prediction because I am not an investor. I am currently trying to understand the development, and I think there are different opinions depending on who you're talking with. For me, I look at the official understanding from policy perspectives. The bright future of BCI, if there will be a bright future, it will mainly in three aspects. One is that the development of this industry can accelerate our understanding of the brain. From the scientific and knowledge production point of view, it is significant. And secondly, in China currently, the major application is in the medical sphere. So it could bring benefits to people with disabilities, Alzheimer, Parkinson, depression, and so on. Although to what extent the BCI treatments can be effective is still to be tested, but it can be a new option for patients who don't have other means to treat their diseases. And thirdly, BCI is quite closely connected to the development of AI and embedded intelligence, especially like robotics. This is quite clear in government policies. But again, to what extent all these three technologies can be merged is also to be seen. But more concretely, recently I was at the World AI Conference in Shanghai, and the leading BCI company in China, Brainco, is splitting its business into BCI, AI, and robotics. And what it does is to help robots gather or help the development of robots by gathering data and robotics training through BCI devices and prosthetic hands. So I see now the combination there is more in research and development and not so much in actual products yet. So it looks like it's going to be a long process to really see the results and the useful applications in the sector.
Okay, I see. By the way, I also saw this video in BrainCo where the user uses his own brain signal to operate how robotics is gonna do, how it's gonna work. That is surprisingly good, actually, to me. Um, so now we kind of have a general idea of what this bright future would be. But like just from an average people's perspective, what would their life look like when BCI, robotics, AI would be integrated to their life in the future?
It seems to me that, at least from now, the main applications are going to be for people with different sorts of neurological disorders. Because for everyday people, currently there isn't a strong need for them to use BCI related products Although there are products available on the market related to sleep, cognition, and mood adjustments, but those are currently small markets, and companies don't really have a very successful business model with that. But at the same time, investors in this sector still predict that BCI integration into everyday life will be the true turning point for the industry to become successful. I believe currently it is yet to be seen how eventually some type of product will be developed. And I think there are a lot of business storytelling at this point for the sake of attracting investment. So it's important to be a bit cautious about those stories because eventually it's what matters is whether the products are actually useful for the consumers and for the users.
I see. By the way, the problem that you just mentioned is really true to me. The
Mm.
current use case of BCI is a bit unclear. There is not a clear and strong need for that. So like how do Chinese companies react to this problem?
I think there are different types of companies. Like I said, for companies with a strong and very solid technical, medical, and scientific background, they're looking into the long term by focusing on developing medical devices. And with this, they are able to get public financing and also investors from different types of sources. But at the same time, there are companies that are mostly interested in attracting investment and making some profit in the short term. And for that to happen, I have heard that there is quite a lot of business innovation happening. So, because an individual consumer might not be incentivized or convinced to buy the BCI products, they would integrate the products into hotels, massage centers, meditation centers, schools, and so on. So they target more business entities and integrate BCI into their package of services. That's an approach.
Okay,
I
got you, yeah.
Yeah, I guess eventually it also depends on what the company wants, because I believe the purpose of this technology is really to help patients. But this is a long-term process with rigorous clinical trials. But of course, with some market economy, you have companies that mainly is interested in making profits. And with this, there sometimes can be short-sighted applications. So it's a diverse field.
Yeah, got you. That's really insightful. And then when you mentioned that there is still a long way to go for the use case of BCI, like from the medical perspective, I'm also curious to ask, what does Chinese medical compliance behind look like? Is that stricter than FDA?
Well, I don't know because I don't know the FDA story or the FDA process, but for Chinese regulators, there have been efforts to make the approval somewhat straightforward, or at least to make it more streamlined, and in some cases to accelerate approvals for BCI based medical devices. As you might know, that in March, China has launched its first BCI medical device from this company called Neuracle. It was the first in the world to receive a medical certification, and that was approved by the Chinese equivalent of the FDA, which is the National Medical Products Administration. And earlier this month, the first commercial or the first post clinical trial implantation was carried out in Shanghai. So this tells how the Chinese government is accelerating in this aspect by making sure the medical approval side supports this process as much as possible. However, I also don't think it's a careless process because for this neuracle device in particular, it is limited to only motor augmentation and it's a semi invasive device which doesn't really
Mm,
go on top of the brain tissue. So it doesn't have as much as biological damage compared to a fully implantable BCI. And this basically just sets encouragement for the industry, for other companies to
I see.
pursue the certification and approval.
That's really insightful. Okay, so one problem that you mentioned before is that there is no strong need for BCI in the market. On top of that, are there any other problems that Chinese BCI companies are currently facing?
I think there are many. If we look at the whole supply chain or the whole BCI stack, I think in every layer there are challenges from hardware to data to algorithm to application to market entry. There are challenges in the whole process. And that's why the support of the state or of local governments has been essential in creating the market and in helping to resolve technical barriers, as well as to provide industry commons such as data infrastructure, algorithmic infrastructure, and so on.
And then when you said that there are many challenges, what are the top three challenges?
This is a difficult answer for me to give. I am not a fully industry member. I don't have such an evaluation of the top three challenges. But looking at the policy documents, I would say the main challenge first is still in the hardware, the materials, so the chip, the electrode, and the whole packaging of the implanted BCI device. That's one of the top challenges. And the other major one would be data, the volume of data, the quality of data, and the management of data, and so on. I would give these two.
Okay,
Yeah.
got you. I like how humble you are, by the way, Yan.
Well, thank you.
Okay,
I'm just being honest.
yeah. Um, Moving forward, let's just end by one last question.
Mm-hmm.
Outside in and inside out. So let's
Mm-hmm.
start from outside in. Like from foreign countries' perspective,
Mm-hmm.
what are the key takeaways that they probably want to learn from China? Why is China BCI so special? And then inside out, like how should Chinese BCI companies learn from foreign BCI companies? I know it sounds a bit broad, but
Mm-hmm.
just feel free,
Mm-hmm.
whatever coming to your mind.
Right, right. Well, the first point from foreign perspectives, I think for countries that are interested in developing the BCI sector or probably another similar tech sector, it's really important to balance the interaction between the state and the market. Looking at Chinese experience of developing industries, it's obvious that solely relying on the market will not truly make a successful industry, especially an industry that works for the people and the broader developmental goals of the country. It's possible to have an industry that's successful and works for the companies themselves. And for China's BCI development, it has been quite clear and emphasized by the state that the industry has to serve the overall national developmental goals and also to serve the people's interest. So for nascent industries with high technical barriers, I think the state can do a lot in terms of, like I said, one, financing, two, supporting public research institutions, and third, also creating conditions and ecosystems for different actors to interact and to build up the industry. Because an industry basically is an ecosystem, and an ecosystem doesn't just formulate by itself. I'm actually interested in knowing more how it is like in the United States because eventually in my research, I would also do a comparative analysis among the EU, US, and China. And now I'm mostly focusing on the Chinese case. And then for your second point, what can Chinese companies learn? I do think this is a more difficult question for me to answer. But at least one thing that I can say is that I think Chinese companies can learn in terms of having better international collaborations, because it seems to me that the ecosystem in China is quite autonomous and it's quite lively, and there's a lot happening. There's many different ecosystems in China within the large ecosystem. So there's a lot of interactions inside China. And from what I have seen before, just by looking at articles and news reports, I understand that at least between Europe and the United States, companies and research centers and projects and also investors have much more interactions with each other. But I also understand that nowadays with geopolitical tensions, it's not dependent on Chinese companies' willingness. It's dependent on many other factors, whether or not Chinese companies are allowed to interact with other companies and exchange knowledge and so on.
I see. Yeah, it sounds like geopolitical factors having such a big impact on BCI companies. Uh, Thank you for a great answer. Also, just to answer a question about current situation in the United States, I would say one difference is that to me, it seems like American consumers have stronger willingness to pay for BCI because probably they care more about their quality of their sleep, their mental diseases, the quality of their meditation than Chinese people do. Another situation I'd like to share is that the industry is a bit scattered in the United States, and not only US. I think that's also works in Europe. And actually, that's why I want to create WorldChangers because when I founded Neurobase in the United States, I wanted to collaborate with American BCI startups, do business with them, but hardly could I find them because most of the public companies are founded like 3, 5 years ago, and there is no specialized startup accelerator just for BCI. There's even no really good community for that. So I was like, if the data infrastructure is not there yet, if the people infrastructure is not there yet, then I should build the people infra first before data infra. And that's why I created WorldChangers. But again, overall, I am really honored to be here and I really appreciate you showing up. I know it's quite late in China time.
No problem.
Thank you so much, Yan.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. I hope we can talk more in the future and we all learn together and share our views, observations, and insights, because it's a global endeavor. And I think for us all, especially for me as a non-technical person, I feel like there is a role for all of us to play in the development of this industry,
Yeah, let's do it.
right?
All right. Bye.